Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Triple Play Podcast. This is your host, Danielle, and today I'm joined by Seth Rayborn. It's kind of a sad week on Rocky Top. It's a sad Monday. It feels like a Monday. That's the only way to say it. And it's not just because finals are approaching. It's not because everyone's still in a food coma from Thanksgiving, although that could partially be the reason. I know we both are.
I know I am.
Yeah, but it's mainly due in part to Tennessee's loss to Vanderbilt. Wow. It's shocking. I don't think anyone really saw it coming.
Yeah.
A few people would say it jokingly, like, "Oh, what if Vanderbilt beats Tennessee? Ha ha ha." Now it's reality.
Yeah.
It's a tough reality for Tennessee fans. It's a tough reality just for Tennessee with Vol Nation in general. But that's just it's kind of how it goes. Second loss to Vanderbilt in 4 years, but we'll talk about that more in a second. But Tennessee closed out the regular season, like I said, with a loss to Vanderbilt, 45-34. The Vols started off strong. They were up by 21-7 at one point in the second quarter after a hat trick was completed by Alvin Kamara early on. He was scoring like crazy. Yeah. But the second half was all Vanderbilt. They outscored the Vols 21-3 en route to a win, with the most points the Commodores have scored against the Vols since their 51-7 win in 1923. Ridiculous. Absolutely, it's insane. But looking back at the game, which is the better summary for the overall play? Was it Tennessee underplaying, or was it Vanderbilt showing its strength and resiliency?
I would definitely say Tennessee underplayed. The defense honestly looked just horrendous. Kyle Shermer looked like a Heisman candidate out there. Yeah. He had himself a game. He has struggled all year. He just looked like he had himself a game. So, the secondary looked like they were completely lost, which is surprising with Cam Sutton back there.
Yeah.
And, that allowed them to open up the pass game. And when Vanderbilt's able to do that and get Ralph Webb the ball, and our run defense has obviously struggled. That just pretty much did us in, I think. But I would definitely say we underplayed. I do think Vanderbilt's a great team. Mm-hmm. Derek Mason's a great coach, and I think they're definitely on the rise. But I would say it's more of a Tennessee underplaying problem than a Vanderbilt showing its strength. But.
Yeah, and see, for me, for a majority of the weekend, and even into this morning, I kept saying it was Tennessee being the underplaying team in the matchup. But the more I've thought about it, I went through and watched a replay of the game. I don't know why I did it, but I did. I honestly think this was Vanderbilt playing up to their potential. This is the game that Vanderbilt has been looking for. Kyle Shermer, like you said, he looked like he was a pro out there. He had 416 passing yards, which was a career mark for him, which is great. That's a career day. He did have one interception, but that kind of just was completely unnoticed.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Tennessee really capitalized on that. It was a great pickup by Micah Abernathy, but that was the only downside, I guess you could say, to Shermer's gameplay in the entire game. He was great. And Vanderbilt outgained Tennessee 608 yards to 516 total yards on offense. And it was a tough game for Tennessee. Vanderbilt played to their capabilities. They played to the level that most people were expecting and looking for them to play at some point.
Definitely.
I just think a lot of people didn't really think it would come against Tennessee, maybe against another team, but
yeah.
It was supposed to be an easy win for Tennessee, but Tennessee just, you were right with what you said about the defense. Even with having Cam Sutton out there were just pieces missing to their play.
And really there have been all season. It's just like we've just seemed lost in the secondary. And that obviously puts more pressure on our front seven, but
sure.
But yeah, we just seem like we're lost. But the guy that I really do feel bad for, and I think everybody feels bad for, no matter who you're a fan of, is Josh Dobbs. He had the game of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it pretty much just got overshadowed by the fact that Butch Jones and honestly the rest of the team dropped one to Vandy. So that's kind of a guy I hurt for. But he went out strong. So
he did. 340 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Almost perfect, 31 for 34 through the air. That is a great day. That's fantastic. Yeah. His QB rating was around 80 compared to Kyle Shermer, who was at 90. But even Tennessee's rushing game, not as strong as most people had seen. No. It started off so strong because of Kamara getting the 2 touchdowns early on, but he was still contained to just 69 yards rushing on 10 carries.
Yeah.
His longest was only 17 yards. And we've seen a lot with Kamara being strong on those short runs, but a lot of people expected more from their rushing game. And I think looking over at Vanderbilt's rushing game as well, most people looked at Webb to have a big day, which he had 114 yards with 2 touchdowns. That was big. But just what is the surprising point with Vanderbilt? Kyle Shermer. I don't think anybody really expected him to be that strong because he's been so up and down all season.
Yeah, that's what Vanderbilt has been looking for all season. Like, I mean, Ralph Webb, you know, he's been struggling in recent weeks. I mean, it's been a while since he's you know, had a 100-yard rushing game. I mean, he had one against Ole Miss last week, but before that it was Tennessee State.
Right.
The last time he had a 100-yard rushing game. So, I mean, Ralph Webb is definitely thankful for Shermer showing up, and I think that's probably what did us in. You know, our secondary was struggling, but they were, once they got the pass game going, I think Ralph Webb just kind of did us in. And, I think that was the problem for Tennessee. I think having to face that rushing game with Kyle Shermer playing like he did really threw us off. But
I agree with that. You know, I mean, Webb was great, but Shermer, I'm still baffled by how he played. I know at one point during the fourth quarter, I saw the stat that he had 400 yards at that point. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way this is happening. But, you know, it was a great showing by Vanderbilt. And, you know, Tennessee, for the most part this season, was looked at as that second half team. I feel like that was kind of the story with Tennessee this whole season. But the second half, it was all Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt held Tennessee to 3 points. And they even caused Tennessee to have a missed field goal. I mean, maybe they didn't cause it. It was a tough field goal for Medley. But, you know, Vanderbilt was definitely getting into the heads of the Vols. That was easy to see. But it was just a great showing by Vanderbilt. They took control in that second half, which I think is something they definitely needed, especially playing in front of their home crowd. You know, this was a big game for Vanderbilt, and I feel like they played to the potential that they've been looking for all season, and this is the game where they desperately needed it, trying to get that bowl eligibility that they haven't had since, I want to say, like 2014 or so, 2013, somewhere in there.
Something like that.
But, you know, it's been a few years. I'm going to say it was since the James Franklin era.
Yeah, I know it hasn't happened in the Derek Mason era.
Right. So, I mean, this was crucial for Vanderbilt, and they came in there and did what they needed to do. They got the win that they were looking for, and there's no way around it. Vanderbilt just played the stronger game. But the end of the game has really been called, well, the end of the game for Tennessee, I should say, has been called into question whether it fell on Butch Jones or if it fell on just gameplay itself. I know a lot of people looked at the way Kamara ran out of bounds. You could tell just from my opinion, you could see that he knew he messed up on that play. So it makes you wonder if they were trying to go for that touchdown or if they should have gone for the field goal. No one will know at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me to kick the field goal there. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to act like you know, I know that as much as a coach would.
Right,
on that,
exactly.
But I mean, it made perfectly good sense to kick the field goal there. But yeah, it was obvious to tell that Alvin Kamara saw what he had done. I was a little bit confused on what he was doing there.
Exactly.
But, you know, that I don't see why he wouldn't kick the field goal there. And that kind of calls into questions the same thing with Butch Jones from last season, going for 2. You know, and he followed the sheet. So it was definitely just kind of it calls into question. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it just kind of makes you wonder what's kind of going on with this team. So, you know, it's kind of hard to tell, but I think a lot of it does fall on Butch Jones. So
yeah, and I mean, a lot of people have been saying that he should be on the hot seat. I mean, this was Tennessee's second loss to Vanderbilt in 4 years. That is 2 losses in Butch Jones's time here as the coach. So with him, with all of this talk spurring about him being on the hot seat, do you think that Butch Jones is on the hot seat?
I definitely think he's on the hot seat. I think, you know, after that South Carolina loss, a lot of it was kind of swirling around. I wouldn't say he was on the hot seat, but that second loss in the back half of the schedule just kind of, you know, that kind of created a problem for him. Missing out on the SEC championship, you know, that hurt for the team. Then obviously missing out on the Sugar Bowl. And then just that loss to Vandy, I think, would definitely put it. I don't think, you know, I'm not going to say that anything's going to happen like over the offseason or anything. I think that's too quick. I think next season, though, if he doesn't produce 9-10 win season, at least show some type of improvement, if not an ACC championship, I think there's a chance that Butch Jones is out. So.
Yeah, for me, I've been teeter-tottering on this for days now, but, you know, I'm going to stick with my gut instinct and say that he's not on the hot seat just yet. But I think that's just because, you know, there was the end of the season. This Tennessee team, I know there was a lot of pressure on this team going in. They should have been 10-2 at this point. Everyone has been saying that. But I'm gonna stick with the idea of him not being on the hot seat just because, you know, I've said this from the beginning. Whenever you have a new coach that comes in, you can't have the number one team in that first year. You can't even have it in the first 3 seasons.
Fair.
Whenever you get to the 4th season like he's in now, that's whenever you're starting to like see some changes. But this team, I feel like there were pieces that broke down, especially towards the middle whenever you're losing players, and then you have so many injuries too that plague a team. So I think that factored in a lot to this season. I mean, looking at the losses to A&M, Alabama, and South Carolina, especially the A&M and South Carolina ones, I feel like those are the most glaring, aside from the Vanderbilt one, despite getting basically blown out by Alabama. But the injuries that plagued this team, I think that kind of takes Butch Jones off the hot seat, I would say, just because they were playing through adversity the whole season. Tennessee had so many things going against them in terms of gameplay, players being gone, and then losing players as well. I mean, like we've talked about extensively with Hurd leaving. I feel like he's not on the hot seat. If you go into next season, like you said, if Tennessee's not performing to where they should be, potentially, he really has to, Tennessee has to worry about the improvements that come along in that 5th season. I feel like the 5th year is crucial because it's like you have a whole recruiting class and you're having a second recruiting class being shown. So I'm going to say he's not on the hot seat. I don't see him going anywhere just yet, despite how many people want him to be fired. That's not going to happen because you're having a new AD come in for Tennessee. It's not going to happen. No matter how many people want Butch Jones to be gone, it's not going to happen just yet. Maybe in years to come. I mean, coaching moves are going to happen, like we've seen this weekend with Texas and with LSU. Coaches are going to come and go, but no matter how hard the fans are campaigning for him to be fired, it's not going to happen. You can say he's on the hot seat, but it's not hot enough for him to be taken away.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I do want to play kind of devil's advocate a little bit.
We love that around here.
I mean, you said this could have been a possible 10-2 team, but kind of what has been swirling around is this not like a 6-6 team that kind of squeaked out wins against Appalachian State and obviously the home area of Georgia, and that kind of is a little bit of a shock. So I mean, you can see both sides of it, but I mean, if you do look at the first half of that schedule as well, I mean, you see the Vols, squeak out that win over Appalachian State at the very beginning of the season. That was a little bit of a concern for everybody.
Yeah.
And then the win over Georgia really, was, I'm not going to say a fluke, but I mean, we kind of squeaked out a win there.
Sure.
So it's hard to tell, to be honest with you.
It
they
is.
could very easily be 10-2. They could very easily be 6-6. So the Vols definitely have something to look at going to this offseason. I'm not sure what it is. I know it's very confusing.
It is.
I think Mike DeBoer's contract is coming up. I'm not sure if I would be surprised if Butch Jones and Tennessee decided to renew that.
That's true.
So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I do think some type of change needs to happen, but I think the Vols are kind of just as confused as everybody else is, including the fans.
Definitely, and I liked where you went with the 6-6, because if you want to have some positivity looking at this Vanderbilt game, that's a happy medium between where they could have been on both sides of the spectrum, between 6-6 and 10-2. I mean, 8-4, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, second in the SEC East. A lot of people are still upset that they didn't win the East, but, things like this happen in college football, and especially in the SEC. The East has not been strong at all this season. We've talked about that. I feel like we've pretty much hammered down that fact the whole semester.
Pretty much.
It's been a tough year for the East, tough year for Tennessee, but I mean, 8-4, that's still respectable. It's just, of course, with the way Vol Nation is, it doesn't meet the expectations of most fans. And that's the sad part about coaching in the SEC or in college football in general. There's so much riding on every single job, and so many people expect so much from their coaches, and especially the players too. But we haven't seen much being said about the players. It's all the talks have fallen on the coaching staff. But it's unfortunate that this is happening. I mean, personally, I think Butch Jones is a great coach. He has really done so much for this Tennessee team, for the Tennessee fan base as well, bringing back a lot of the hope and a lot of the passion that Tennessee really hasn't seen since the Fulmer days, honestly.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the off season. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks as we start to find out where Tennessee falls in terms of a bowl. So the Vols finished the regular season 8-4, 4-4 in the SEC, and they fell out of the top 25 for the AP, which pretty much everyone expected. So all that's left on the season, like I said, is finding out what bowl game the Vols will be in. This weekend, CBS Sports, put out kind of their prediction on bowl games coming up, and they projected the Vols to take on North Carolina in the Tax Slayer Bowl, a place where Tennessee has been before, and they kind of know the ropes there. But what is your take on this projection?
I mean, I would say that's pretty fair. I would say the Music City Bowl is a chance, but I would also say that there's a chance that they would rather choose Kentucky to play in that game over us after that big win over Louisville. I think that definitely those Kentucky fans will travel. So I think there's honestly a really good chance that we go to the Tax Slayer Bowl. And it's just a matter of whether or not it'll be interesting to see if the Vol fans will travel back to Jacksonville again to watch, as you could say, an underachieving team on the season. So, I mean, and I think they're projected to play North Carolina. That's a great team. They beat Florida State and Miami.
Right.
It'll definitely be an interesting game. But, yeah, the turnout for that game is going to be very interesting to see because I think a lot of Vol fans are disappointed with the season, and booking a ticket to Jacksonville may be a little bit depressing for them. So
right, and especially because it goes without question that there are quite a few Tennessee fans out there who probably booked tickets to Tampa, honestly. So now they're trying to get refunds. That's no surprise with exactly. So I personally think that the Tax Slayer Bowl I think it's probably the fair choice right now. It's the fair prediction to be making. Looking at if they could, well, they might be able to reach like the Citrus Bowl, maybe. That's kind of out of question right now.
Yeah.
We've talked extensively about the Sugar Bowl kind of being out of the realm of Tennessee right now. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but I would go with Tax Slayer Bowl being pretty fair, but I was looking at the Music City Bowl too as maybe somewhere Tennessee could fall if these cards didn't play out right, but you hit the nail right on the head with Kentucky beating Louisville like they did. I'm still baffled by that win. I think they kind of have the Music City Bowl on lock right now. I think they're the one team to really have it on lock, in my opinion. But it'll be interesting to see where Tennessee falls. I mean, I know a lot of fans, like you said, they're not going to be happy no matter where Tennessee goes because it's not the Sugar Bowl and it's not a championship. So that's just kind of how it is with Tennessee right now. But, if you're a Tennessee fan, I think you should still be supporting this team no matter where they fall in terms of a bowl. Because it gives them an extra game. That's one way to look at it. It gives you more football to watch. But that'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be seeing where Tennessee's going to fall. So let's move over to the SEC real quick in general. So looking at the AP rankings, only 4 teams left. Alabama at number 1, Florida at number 15, Auburn at number 18, and LSU at number 21. Going into this week, as alluded to already, there were talks of Tennessee going to the Sugar Bowl. But out of the 3 SEC teams that are left in the top 25, which team do you see making it at this point?
I think there's a very strong chance that Auburn gets in.
Yeah.
They played great against that. Well, played about as good as against Alabama as anybody has outside of LSU. So I think that's probably your best chance of a team going to the Sugar Bowl. Obviously, after Tennessee kind of dropped the ball on that, but it's kind of just interesting to see how the SEC West even has kind of dropped off. I mean, you see just the standings. You've got Alabama and then just everybody else.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think that will probably be your second choice would be Auburn. So that'll definitely be interesting to see, but I do think Auburn is probably the best choice there for at least the bowl. But
see, it's interesting for me because I figured they were the one that had the least amount of chance to get into it.
Yeah.
I was sticking with Florida or LSU just because we've seen more out of those 2 teams this season. I feel like Florida would kind of be the easy pick, but they're also the easy pick for the Citrus Bowl too.
Yeah.
It would be cool to see LSU there. I mean, that would be basically a home game for LSU
much,
in Baton Rouge. But I could see the argument for Auburn. I think that could be interesting to see them in the Sugar Bowl. But I'm going to stick with Florida having the edge there, despite them. They could go to the Citrus Bowl. That would also be an easy home game for them, or not easy. It would just be a home game. But I'm gonna stick with Florida. I feel like they have a chance just because they are gonna be representing the East in the SEC championship. So I feel like that would be a good pick for them for the Sugar Bowl. But I could see the argument with Auburn, the way you went about it. I could see that, I think.
I think a lot does ride on how Florida shows up in the SEC championship. I think if they go out there and just get absolutely demolished, like a lot of people are predicting, I think there's a chance that you do have an LSU or an Auburn team squeaking in there.
Sure.
So I think a lot does ride on the SEC championship for Florida to whether or not they could get into the Sugar Bowl. So
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I could if Florida does get blown out, probably the Citrus Bowl, honestly, for them, and I think that's whenever you could see Auburn squeak right in to the Sugar Bowl. But you're right. A lot is riding on this SEC championship, and that's our quick take for this week. So we'll keep it quick because I feel like no matter who you pick, you can kind of keep it to a really simple explanation.
Yeah.
For who wins the SEC championship, who do you see it being, Florida or Alabama?
I think definitely Alabama. Two of the best defenses in the nation there.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at it from a very simple point of view, I mean, they both have great defenses, but who has the upper hand on offense? It's obviously going to be Alabama there. Florida really hasn't done much on offense all season. They've been obviously plagued with injuries, Luke Del Rio and all that. But yeah, I think there is absolutely no chance that Florida is going to be able to keep up points wise with Alabama.
Yeah, I agree, and my reasoning was the exact same for yours. I mean, you have the two of the best defenses in the nation, but which team does have better offense? And it's going to be Alabama. There have been too many question marks with Florida all season, and I think you really talked about it, with the injuries, but also just kind of being able to rely on certain players. They've had to look at different players to be leaders the whole season. So I feel like there's too much inconsistency with this Florida team. So the edge obviously goes to Alabama. I mean, no matter who was going to be in the SEC championship against Alabama, Alabama was going to have the edge.
Yeah.
But they're too good to pick against right now. I mean, they're the favorite right now to just win it all again. They're too good this season. They have too many things going their way. So I definitely think that'd be the easy pick. And that game is definitely going to play a big part in determining bowl games. But those will be coming up in a few weeks. So the top 4 in the AP rankings that were released on Sunday are Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Washington. Do you think that these 4 teams are the ones who will make it into the Final Four for the CFP?
I think there's a very good chance of those being the Final Four. I think Alabama will take care of business in Atlanta. I think Ohio State will probably get in, although they're not in the Big Ten Championship. I think that win over Michigan probably solidified them there.
Sure.
I think Clemson will coast through. I do kind of see Washington maybe having trouble with Colorado there. But nobody's really given Washington much of a test. So I do think if a team does do it, there's a chance that it's Colorado. That's really the only team that I could see maybe flip-flopping, but those 3, Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, I don't think are going anywhere.
I agree with that. For some reason, the more I look at it, I'd been saying that that's the exact top 4, but Clemson and Washington could switch in some ways. I could see them being switched for 3 and 4, but Ohio State, they're pretty much set no matter what happens in the Big Ten Championship since they're not there. They're a lock for number 2. With that Clemson, Washington, that could switch, but we could even see Michigan or Wisconsin somehow making it in. Both teams have been solid. I mean, Michigan's lost to Ohio State, since it wasn't that crucial of a loss, since it wasn't that much of a blowout, since it went to overtime, I think they could somehow squeak in to that top 4 maybe, but for some reason I'm still leaving them out. I'm looking at Wisconsin to maybe squeak.
I'm not sure what would happen there when you've got Michigan at 5, Wisconsin at 6, but what if Wisconsin wins the Big Ten Championship? I would say if I was on the committee, you would toss them in over Michigan. But that's just kind of hard to see. That's where kind of the gray area is that nobody knows. But I do think there's a pretty good chance that maybe Colorado gives Washington a game, maybe upsets them, and possibly Michigan and Wisconsin squeak in.
Right. I think Wisconsin getting in could be huge for the college football playoff just because, Wisconsin's a team that we've seen be productive and successful in the past decade. As of late, they've been a strong team, but this has been one of their better seasons. Washington, I think having them in the top 4 would just kind of be like the Cinderella story of sorts. You always want to have that one Cinderella team, and that would be the Cinderella team. Michigan, I mean, that's just another powerhouse you're used to seeing in contention this late in the game. So I think the committee has quite a hefty job ahead of them this week, since the rankings do come out on Tuesday. It'll be interesting to see who does make it into that Final Four, but I definitely think that the top 2 are a lock. It's just 3 and 4 could rotate, and one of those 2, I mean, looking at Washington, could be taken out just on the complete matter of favorites being picked within the committee. So it'll be an interesting next couple of days, really next couple of weeks heading into bowl season to see who's going to be in that top 4. But make sure you're looking for the college football rankings that will be released on Tuesday at some point during the day. Looking over at basketball really quick before we sign off for today and for the semester, the basketball Vols, the men Vols, went 1-2 at the Maui Invitational. It was quite a showing despite how young they were and with them having the 2 losses they did, but they were resilient losses. It was very strong performances from Tennessee. They lost close games to Wisconsin and Oregon, both teams being ranked, I'll add that, but they beat Chaminade, which was a really good game for Tennessee. It was a very strong showing, but the whole invitation itself was big for Tennessee. So overall, were you pleased with what you saw from the Tennessee team?
I was definitely pleased seeing how the Vols played there. I thought it was great to see Robert Hubbs kind of take control of the team, given that he's one of the only upperclassmen on the team. I thought you saw great, efforts from John Fulkerson. Dietrich Mostella obviously had fantastic Maui Invitational. So, although they came out of that with 2 losses, I think it was honestly for the better. That after seeing how Tennessee struggled with Chattanooga, and it's interesting to see that they really put up a fight against 2 well-known ranked teams. Right. So I think it really shows how bright the future is for Tennessee basketball.
I agree. And I mean, looking at the Invitational going in, there were so many good teams that were invited to this. You had, like I said last week, Oregon, which we just talked about. You had UConn, Georgetown, Oklahoma State, Wisconsin. So many good teams were invited to play in this. So, I mean, Tennessee was going to face good competition no matter who they played. There was not one bad school in this Invitational. That's the only way to go about it. I mean, Chaminade was great, too. They put up one heck of a fight against Tennessee. But I think this was a very big chance for Tennessee to show what they're made of with such a young team. I think you're right there. It was great to see Tennessee perform the way they did. I think we're starting to really see who the leaders are on this team, like you alluded to. Dietrich Mostella is probably going to be huge this season. He had a great game against Wisconsin. I think, it was against Oregon. Yeah, he had 22 points. That overtime win, I'm still baffled by that. That was ridiculous. I honestly didn't think it was going to go to overtime. Yeah. There was a big part of me that was thinking that Oregon would just kind of handle Tennessee in that. But I think it was a great showing for Tennessee, and they have a really rough schedule heading into the next really month as they get ready to head into SEC play at the end of December. But, I mean, they're going to be taking on Georgia Tech, Presbyterian, North Carolina, Tennessee Tech, Lipscomb, Gonzaga, and ETSU in the next few weeks. Those are a lot of good teams you're going to be taking on. So it's going to be a lot for Tennessee as they head into these next few weeks. But their next game is going to be on Saturday at 1 p.m. They're hosting Georgia Tech, and you can find that on SEC Network. Plus, looking over at the Lady Vols really quick, they suffered their second straight loss for the season on Sunday at Virginia Tech. Very tough game for Tennessee. 2 tough back-to-back losses with, I don't want to say major upsets, but those were pretty big upsets. Virginia Tech still undefeated on this season, I want to say. I think they're 6-0 at this point. So, I mean, that's a good team. And, going to Blacksburg's not really an easy place to play no matter what sport you're playing. But what will it take, I should say, for the Lady Vols to get back to their winning ways?
I'm honestly not sure. To me, this is just as confusing as the football team is. It's just like, it seems like after Pat Summitt, left, I think they seem like very lost. They don't really have much of an identity, doesn't seem like. Those 2 back-to-back losses, they're going into a very heavy schedule. They've got Baylor and Texas. Yeah. So I'm not sure what it'll take. I mean, we're bringing in a huge class, like very good class, one of the top-ranked classes in the nation. So I think I'm not sure what it's going to take, to be honest with you. I don't know how I'm going to answer that question, but having 2 losses this early in the season, maybe it'll be a reality check. Maybe Tennessee will respond well to that, but
Sure.
I'm not sure what it'll take for this team to play like they are. I mean, even last season they did struggle a little bit.
They did, yeah.
It's just very confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tough start. I mean, they're 3-2 on the season right now, and those 2 losses to Penn State and Virginia Tech, those should have been rather easy games for Tennessee. But I think what it comes down to in terms of gameplay, Tennessee needs to learn to handle the ball better. I think that's the one glaring problem. In terms of turnovers, they had 21 turnovers against Virginia Tech. I want to say Virginia Tech had 10 turnovers in that game. And then against Penn State, they tied the Nittany Lions with 12. So I mean, that's kind of a large jump in terms of turnovers. But it's crucial. You can't have that many turnovers. Whenever you're able to win the rebounding game, that's good. That's great. I mean, go for the rebounds. But you have to hold on to it. You can't just turn over the ball that much. And three-point shooting also could be a turning point for Tennessee. They've struggled with it in the past couple of games, especially in those 2 losses. Three-point shooting was pretty tough. So I think it comes down to those few points in terms of gameplay where Tennessee could turn around their ways to get back to winning. I mean, 3-2, yes, it is still very early in the season, but those are 2 tough losses so far. But they're going to head back to Knoxville to take on Tennessee State, and that's going to be on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock on SEC Network Plus. You can stream that online, so maybe Tennessee will be able to get back to its winning ways in that game. But, it's still early. It's still early for basketball, not for football. Football's done, basically, except for the bowl game, and it's pretty sad. It's a Monday. That's how it feels right now here at the Triple Play Podcast. It feels like a Monday. But that's all that we have for this week. That's all we have for the semester. A lot has happened, a lot of movement for Tennessee football, a lot of news that we've had to cover for Tennessee sports, especially Tennessee football this season. Yeah. But I thank you once again for joining us this week and every week. For Seth Rayborn, I am Danielle. Enjoy the rest of 2016 for what's left of it. Enjoy bowl season as it heads around the corner. But thank you for joining us here on the Triple Play Podcast. Have a good rest of the year.